Okay, so let's talk honestly for a second. You know how sometimes people come after you. They try to dig up dirt, spread rumors, and generally make your life a little bit harder. It's a tough place to be, and honestly, it can really mess with your head. But what if I told you that their efforts might actually be doing you a favor? Here's a truth I've learned the hard way. When someone goes looking for negativity, they often end up revealing more about themselves than about you. It's like their bitterness becomes the spotlight. But get this. Sometimes when they're digging around expecting to find a wasteland, they stumble upon a blooming garden instead. Imagine their surprise. They're ready to collect insults, but all they hear is praise. They expect whispers of scandal, but they get bombarded with stories of respect and admiration. Suddenly their whole plan crumbles. They thought they were exposing you, but they were actually exposing their own jealousy and insecurities. It's awkward, right? They walked in like prosecutors ready to condemn, but they walked out like unpaid publicists singing your praises. See, they were hoping for skeletons in your closet, but all they found was neatly folded laundry. And that's when the reality hits them. The problem wasn't you all along. It was their own need to see you as someone you're not, just to justify their own feelings of resentment. The truth is, reality doesn't bend to envy, it bends to truth. And right now the truth is echoing loud and clear. Everyone they asked had nothing but good things to say about you. Their interrogation inadvertently transformed into your powerful confirmation. They went in thinking they were so clever, ready to expose some hidden flaw, some secret mistake. They were convinced they'd find anyone who had been waiting for a chance to tear you down. They needed confirmation that the stories they had conjured up in their minds were actually true, but instead they kept getting hit with the unexpected. Every person they spoke to confirmed something entirely different. Instead of finding dirt, they encountered mountains of praise. Instead of accusations, they heard heartfelt stories of your kindness, your integrity, the way you carry yourself with such grace. That's when their whole investigation turned into a powerful validation of who you are. The stage they designed to break you instead became the platform that celebrated you. They weren't seeking truth, they were searching for validation for their own twisted lies. The thing is, truth has a way of standing strong on its own 2 feet. No one had to invent anything in your defense. They simply spoke the reality they knew, and it was undeniable. And that's the most painful part for them, the consistency. It wasn't just 1 or 2 polite words. It was a clear pattern they couldn't ignore. Every answer aligned with the last painting, a vivid portrait of someone reliable, trustworthy, and genuine. That's when they realized they had completely miscalculated. Your character wasn't just a personal opinion, it was common knowledge. And there's nothing harder to fight than a reputation that's been built on years of genuine truth. You didn't have to defend yourself. You didn't have to show up, argue, or try to win anyone over. Other people did it for you because your life had already spoken volumes long before anyone tried to put it on trial. That's the realization that stung them the deepest. They wanted to be the ones holding the gavel, declaring you guilty in the court of public opinion. But the harder they pushed, the brighter they highlighted just how innocent you really were. So their attempt completely backfired. The interrogation they intended to damage you with only elevated you higher. What was meant to weaken your name ended up stamping it with unwavering credibility. They wanted to expose you, but all they did was confirm what you've been all along: real, consistent, and unshakably true to yourself. Which brings us to the next point. Praise became their silent, agonizing punishment. They didn't expect the praise to hurt, but it cut deep. They were so sure they'd find complaints, whispers of negativity, some hidden bitterness. They clung to the hope that someone would echo their own distorted narrative about you. But instead, every response was overwhelmingly positive. Every recollection dripped with respect. That praise wasn't supposed to reassure them, it cornered them. It punished them without a single harsh word directed their way. They wanted you condemned, but instead you were celebrated. Praise can feel like sunlight, but to someone fueled by hate, it burns with the intensity of 1,000 suns. They had convinced themselves that others secretly agreed with them about you. They believed that if they just asked around, their suspicions would be validated. But all the praise they unearthed left them completely defenseless. And in that moment, they were forced to confront a painful truth: their dislike of you isn't shared. It's intensely personal. It's rooted in their own jealousy, and they're the ones carrying the heavy burden of that problem. The very thing they were seeking became their ultimate undoing. Each compliment about your character sliced deeper because it highlighted the emptiness in their own. They had to sit with the uncomfortable reality that you were not only respected but also loved, and that others genuinely value what they could never diminish. That wasn't just uncomfortable, it was profoundly humiliating. It made them look foolish because it revealed that their attempts to discredit you weren't grounded in reality but solely in their own envy. What makes it even more agonizing is that you didn't have to say a single word. You didn't have to fight back or gather a posse to defend you. The people they questioned did it naturally without any prompting, because that's the kind of lasting imprint you've left on their lives. The sheer authenticity of the praise made it undeniable. It wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't exaggerated, it was simply what people knew to be true about you. So the praise itself became their punishment, not because you demanded it, but because they walked straight into it. They set the trap for you, and it snapped back on them with full force. Every kind word spoken about you was a piercing reminder that they were wrong, that they had profoundly misjudged you, and that the person they tried so hard to paint as the problem was, in fact, the very one others honored and respected. The truth is, the absence of dirt on your name did more damage to them than any direct confrontation ever could. They were utterly convinced that if they asked the right questions, pressed the right people, or dug deep enough, they would eventually unearth something they could use against you. They craved proof of hypocrisy, an old mistake, even the slightest trace of a double standard. But every door they knocked on left them empty-handed. There was nothing to collect, no juicy gossip to cling to, no scandal to parade around. That silence wasn't protecting you. It was exposing them. The more they searched and came up empty, the more glaringly obvious it became that the problem wasn't you at all. Their frustration wasn't simply that they couldn't find flaws. It was that their desperate obsession with finding them revealed their true intentions with startling clarity. They weren't after the truth. They were after destruction. And the more their pathetic efforts failed, the clearer it became that the darkness they were so eagerly searching for was actually lurking inside of them. That's the profound power of living consistently with integrity. Your life didn't provide them with the ammunition they so desperately craved. You weren't perfect, but you were genuine. You weren't flawless, but you were solid. You lived in such a way that even those who didn't particularly like you had nothing substantial to say against you, so their mission to dig up dirt only served to highlight their consuming envy and their desperate need to tear down what they simply couldn't match. They thought the absence of flaws would somehow frustrate you, but it frustrated them instead. At some point, they had to confront the embarrassing reality that their failure to find evidence wasn't accidental. It was inevitable. They desperately wanted others to confirm their negative view of you. But what people actually saw was a vastly different story. The very fact that they were searching so hard became incredibly suspicious to others. It made people wonder why they were so intent on ruining someone who had such a consistently clean reputation. Their obsession raised far more eyebrows than your actions ever did. So in the end, their entire search spectacularly backfired. What they couldn't find spoke volumes louder than anything they had hoped to expose. The absence of dirt wasn't just an empty space to be filled. It was a powerful reflection of your inner strength of character. And while they were left looking petty and desperate, you stood taller, untouched, and even more validated by the complete failure of their fruitless hunt. Remember, being liked is nice, but being trusted, that's a whole different game. When they started hearing what others had to say about you, it wasn't just flattering remarks or casual compliments that surfaced. It was something much deeper, something far more meaningful. People didn't simply say you were nice or easy to get along with. They spoke with profound conviction, almost like they were fiercely protecting your name in your absence. That's when the realization hit them with the force of a tidal wave. You weren't just liked, you were deeply trusted. And that's a completely different league of respect. Being liked can be superficial. It can be based on charm, appearance, or fleeting impressions. But trust is forged over long periods of time through consistent actions, through moments where your actions perfectly matched your words, and where your character remained unwavering whether people were watching or not. That kind of deeply rooted reputation doesn't come from talking about yourself. It comes from how others experienced you in the quiet, ordinary moments when no spotlight was shining. And when those same people spoke up so passionately on your behalf, they weren't just exaggerating. They were offering heartfelt testimony. That's the critical part your enemies didn't factor into their warped calculations. They mistakenly thought people's opinions of you were shallow enough to be easily swayed by gossip or poisoned by subtle suggestion. They believed that if they dropped a few carefully crafted doubts, others would quickly latch on and run with their narrative. But instead, they encountered something completely unshakable. People weren't just fond of you. They relied on your character, and they had an abundance of evidence from their own personal experiences to prove it. They simply couldn't be convinced otherwise because they knew too much of the real you. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The very people who tried to smear you don't have that same level of trust in their own lives. They may have followers, they may even have people who laugh along with their jokes. But when it comes down to genuine, unwavering trust, who would vouch for them if someone questioned their character? Who would speak with such unwavering confidence about their integrity that deafening silence is what ultimately separates them from you? So when the reports came flooding back, they weren't just hearing flimsy praise. They were hearing a collective, resounding testimony that you are solid, dependable, and authentic. And that kind of profound respect can't be purchased, manipulated, or faked. It's the direct result of years of being true to yourself through thick and thin. They wanted you discredited, but instead they stumbled into the kind of profound credibility they could never hope to manufacture for themselves. This whole scenario makes me think about stage production. They had the whole storyline laid out perfectly in their minds. You were supposed to be the villain, the one everyone secretly disliked but hadn't spoken up about yet. They rehearsed it, they believed it with every fiber of their being, and they were utterly confident that when they finally started spreading that warped version of you, people would nod in agreement and eagerly confirm their twisted narrative. But when they put their plan to the test, something completely unexpected happened. The responses simply didn't align with their meticulously crafted script. Instead of finding agreement, they were met with utter confusion. Instead of bitterness, they were met with genuine admiration. Every single person they asked gave feedback that completely shattered the false tale they were trying so desperately to tell. That's when their carefully built script began to unravel in a very public and humiliating fashion. The story they had been clinging to wasn't just wrong, it was exposed as utter fiction. People didn't just fail to back them up. They actively contradicted them. They said the exact opposite of what was expected, offering compelling examples of your integrity, your consistency, and the undeniably positive impact you had made on their lives. And because it was so consistent, it was impossible to dismiss as mere coincidence. It wasn't a matter of opinion anymore. It was a matter of fact that your character stood firm on solid ground. The humiliation wasn't just in being wrong, it was in being publicly revealed as fundamentally dishonest. They weren't exposed as someone with a simple misunderstanding. They were exposed as manipulative individuals who tried to force a false narrative that simply didn't exist. That's a particularly hard pill to swallow, because once people see that level of manipulation, it doesn't just damage their credibility, it utterly destroys it. When someone is caught pushing a fabricated story, every other word they speak becomes instantly questionable. And the truth is, they miscalculated from the very beginning. They thought your reputation was fragile enough to be rewritten by a little bit of juicy gossip. They drastically underestimated how much goodwill you had built up over time, how many people had already witnessed your unwavering consistency, and just how deeply your positive influence actually runs. They assumed you were an easy target for slander, but what they didn't realize is that when a person has dedicated their life to living in truth, their story writes itself and no one can rewrite it. So when their script dramatically collapsed, it didn't just leave them looking foolish, it left you standing even taller, They became the exposed storytellers caught in their own tangled web of lies, while you walked away with your authenticity not only intact, but also powerfully validated by the undeniable voices of countless others. To reiterate, what truly broke them wasn't just that people spoke well of you, it was that everyone did. One person offering kind words could have been easily brushed off as simple favoritism, loyalty, or perhaps a little bit of unconscious bias. They could have convinced themselves that maybe a few people were just defending you out of pity or some form of personal attachment. But when every single voice echoed the same undeniable truth, when the positive pattern was consistent across different people from vastly different times and places in your life, it became something they simply couldn't argue against. That's when the crushing weight of the overwhelming consensus completely shattered their carefully constructed lies. They were banking on division. They assumed that if they dug around long enough, they'd find at least one person willing to air out some negativity, someone who might have held a grudge or an old wound they could exploit to their advantage. But when the positive testimony kept flooding back in your favor, it left them feeling completely cornered and exposed. It wasn't one person here and there offering polite praise. It was a resounding chorus of complete agreement. People weren't hesitant or vague in their responses. They were firm, unwavering, and clear. They vouched for you with such clarity and such profound conviction that every single word made it harder for the false narrative to even survive. The shame they felt grew heavier with each and every heartfelt affirmation of your strong character. With every person who vouched for your integrity, they were reminded of the inescapable fact that their twisted version of you existed only in their own warped imagination. The more people spoke up, the less ground they had to stand on. Their story didn't just fall apart, it was suffocated by the sheer force of truth being repeated over and over again. And that's where the exposure cut deepest. It wasn't just that they were demonstrably wrong about you, it was that everyone else knew it too. Their credibility dissolved in real time because when the collective verdict is overwhelmingly unanimous, the one clinging to the lie becomes the obvious odd one out. They weren't just revealed as bitter or envious. They were revealed as completely disconnected from reality. That's the defining difference between a fleeting rumor and a solid reputation. A rumor is fragile, relying on whispers and doubt. A reputation, when it's built on years of consistent integrity, becomes a powerful wall far too strong to topple. And when they tried to go against that wall, the sheer force of the consensus crushed them completely under the undeniable weight of the unvarnished truth. They went digging for your flaws, utterly convinced that they'd hit the jackpot. They were sure that if they searched long enough, they'd uncover something ugly, an old mistake, a hidden scandal, or an exploitable weakness. That's what fueled their obsessive quest, the unwavering hope that behind your calm presence and your steady character there had to be cracks just waiting to be exposed to the world. But as they pressed deeper and deeper, what they actually found was the complete opposite of what they expected. Instead of unearthing hidden skeletons, they discovered a clear trail of undeniable resilience, genuine kindness, and profound wisdom. The very areas where they anticipated finding weakness were the same areas that testified most powerfully to your enduring inner strength. This realization shattered their confidence because it meant that their entire mission had been built on a completely false assumption. They desperately wanted you to be just like them, messy, bitter, and secretly corrupt. But the mounting evidence simply didn't align with their twisted narrative. People spoke openly about how you handled adversity not with petty bitterness but with unwavering endurance. They recalled how you treated others not with arrogance or condescension but with genuine compassion. They brought up valuable lessons they had learned directly from you, profound wisdom that had helped them shift their perspective, and countless moments when you showed up with integrity, even when you thought no one was watching. Every single attempt to pull your well-earned reputation down only served to lift you even higher in the eyes of those around you. The strength they encountered wasn't loud or showy. It was consistently proven through years of integrity and honorable behavior, and that made it even harder for them to accept. Weakness can be faked into a superficial display of strength, but genuine inner strength can never be fabricated. It has to be earned. They realized that you had something they couldn't simply copy, something they couldn't easily counterfeit, the rare ability to remain whole under immense pressure and completely unshaken during life's inevitable storms. That's the kind of inner strength that comes only from within. And it's the kind of strength they'll never truly embody because it requires consistent truthfulness, unwavering self-discipline, and genuine humility, qualities they have consciously avoided their entire lives. What they naively thought would be your ultimate downfall became a stark mirror reflecting their own profound lack. The more they searched for weakness in you, the more they had to painfully face the glaring reality of their own inherent weaknesses. They weren't just frustrated because you seemingly had no scandals in your past. They were deeply frustrated because your inner strength subtly reminded them of their own abject failure to truly grow. It left them exposed, consumed by envy, and painfully aware that the very qualities they wanted to use against you are the exact same qualities they'll never have the courage to cultivate within themselves. See, their questioning became the real exposure. Their plan seemed simple enough. Ask around, plant a few seeds of carefully crafted doubt, and then patiently wait for the responses to confirm the twisted narrative they had already created about you. But what they failed to anticipate was how their very questions would make people deeply suspicious, not of you, but of them. Instead of successfully collecting dirt, they only managed to draw unwanted attention to their own unhealthy obsession. The more they pried and probed, the more others began to openly wonder why they were so invested in tearing you down in the first place. That's where their entire scheme began to unravel in spectacular fashion. People weren't answering their questions with negativity about you. They were answering with questions about the person doing the questioning. The underlying tone of their probing inquiries revealed a deep-seated envy, a simmering bitterness, and a clear, hidden agenda. It quickly became obvious that they weren't actually motivated by a desire for the truth, but by a potent need to justify their own insecurities. And once people began to notice that troubling pattern, the entire conversation shifted dramatically. You weren't the one under scrutiny anymore. They were. The spotlight they had so carefully tried to shine on you swung right back around and illuminated them instead. Their words, their tone, even their unwavering persistence betrayed something far darker than simple concern. It exposed their intense jealousy and their thinly veiled desperation to see you fall from grace. People who might have initially stayed neutral suddenly saw the clear manipulative pattern. This wasn't about you potentially making mistakes. This was about them desperately needing you to be the villain in their twisted narrative so their own deep-seated insecurities could somehow feel justified. That's the painful irony of it all. By trying so hard to damage your well-earned reputation, they ultimately ended up damaging their own beyond repair. Their relentless questioning made it crystal clear that they were actively hunting for something that simply didn't exist. And that stark realization caused others to lose a significant amount of respect for them. Instead of hearing anything remotely scandalous about you, people saw the immaturity and insecurity oozing out of them. Instead of successfully gathering support for their false claims, they only managed to create widespread suspicion about their own motives. Instead of proving their skewed point, they only exposed their own deeply flawed character. And that's the tragic part they can never undo. You didn't have to lift a finger in your own defense. You didn't have to defend yourself or argue with the accusations. Their own words became the very trap that snared them. Every attempt to discredit you only revealed more about their underlying envy, their simmering bitterness, and their fundamental inability to let you be who you are without desperately trying to diminish it. In the end, their relentless questioning wasn't your exposure. It was theirs, and everyone could see it plain as day. What caught them so completely off guard wasn't just the fact that people spoke well of you. It was that the respect you commanded was already deeply rooted long before they even started asking their pointed questions. They assumed reputations were inherently fragile, that one damaging rumor or one piece of salacious gossip could easily rewrite how others viewed you. But what they ran headfirst into was something they simply weren't prepared for: your invisible reputation. It had been faithfully walking ahead of you for years, subtly shaping people's perceptions of you long before they came along with their petty smear campaign. That kind of rock-solid reputation isn't built overnight through superficial interactions. It's the direct result of countless sincere interactions where your authentic character consistently showed itself, where you unfailingly proved your personal consistency, and where you left people with a lasting impression of who you truly are at your core. By the time they tried to launch their coordinated attacks, people already had a vast library of positive experiences with you stored safely in their memory. And those personal experiences simply didn't align at all with the fabricated narrative your enemies were trying so hard to push. They quickly discovered that trying to dismantle a reputation like yours is very much like trying to argue against recorded history. It simply can't be erased from the collective consciousness. The respect people had for you wasn't shallow or conditional. It was steady, well-earned, and profoundly genuine. It had been rigorously tested by the passage of time, proven through countless challenges, and positively reinforced by the way you consistently carried yourself in both big and small situations. That's why the attacks bounced off you so easily and landed harmlessly on the ground. You weren't being judged based on a few isolated stories. They were being measured against years of undeniable evidence that already spoke volumes on your behalf. What frustrated them the most was the stark realization that your reputation was somehow immune to their sudden, calculated attacks. It wasn't something they could tear down with a few poorly chosen words or a few strategically planted doubts. People had already made up their minds about you long ago, and that well-informed decision was firmly based on the unvarnished truth, not on baseless hearsay or rumors. The more they tried to attack, the more they highlighted just how unshakable your positive standing really was in the eyes of those around you. That invisible reputation, your consistent history of undeniable integrity, your unwavering character, and your profoundly positive impact on others stood tall in the room long before you ever entered it. And when they tried to fight against it, they weren't battling petty rumors. They were battling something far more powerful, the collective memory of everyone who had ever witnessed you walking in truth. And against that, they didn't stand a chance. Most importantly, the truth is that popularity and honor aren't the same thing. What unsettled them most wasn't just the crushing weight of defeat. It was realizing the clear difference between the fleeting kind of superficial attention they're used to and the much deeper kind of genuine recognition you naturally carry. They may command the large numbers, the loud noises, and the superficial crowd that claps their hands when it's socially convenient to do so. But what you have is something far rarer and far more valuable: genuine honor. Popularity can be manipulated, bought, and even faked through calculated influence or a carefully crafted image. Honor, on the other hand, is earned slowly and quietly, often without you even consciously trying. And it's firmly rooted in how you consistently show up in other people's lives when it truly matters. When others spoke so positively about you, they didn't just compliment you in passing. They spoke with genuine weight and conviction. They weren't caught up in the fleeting surface-level admiration that fades as soon as the popular trend inevitably shifts. They were openly acknowledging your core character, your consistent reliability, and your inspiring spirit. That's the type of praise that truly lasts, the type that doesn't suddenly vanish when damaging gossip appears, or when difficult circumstances inevitably change. And that's what profoundly frustrated your enemies. They simply couldn't compete with the profound depth of the respect you've legitimately earned from those around you. Crowds are notoriously fickle. They can cheer you on enthusiastically today and boo you off the stage just as quickly tomorrow. Popularity is inherently fragile. It rises and falls with the fleeting moment. Honor, however, has genuine staying power. It doesn't magically disappear when unfounded rumors spread. It stands strong and unwavering because it's been carefully built on a solid foundation of undeniable truth. That's the key reason why their relentless attempts to discredit you ultimately didn't stick. They were simply throwing baseless accusations at someone who had already been sealed with the deep trust and profound respect of countless others. And nothing they said could rewrite that pre-existing narrative. This stark realization was a painful mirror they simply didn't want to face. They may have more followers, more fleeting attention, and far more noise surrounding them. But when it truly comes down to the critical question of who people would vouch for in a heartbeat, your name consistently rises to the top. And that's something they will never be able to buy, no matter how hard they try. Honor doesn't come from how many people are superficially watching you. It comes from how many people would defend your character when you're not even in the room to defend yourself. That's the undeniable difference that ultimately silenced them. They expected shallow approval to crumble under the slightest pressure, but what they encountered instead was a profoundly deep acknowledgement of your personal integrity. They were starkly reminded that while popularity is undeniably loud, genuine honor is undoubtedly powerful. And in the end, it's honor that easily outlasts every baseless rumor, every calculated attack, and every desperate attempt to rewrite your story. What they didn't realize is that the moment they started talking negatively about you, they were unwittingly giving you free publicity. And instead of the hoped-for scandal traveling far and wide, what actually spread was a surge of heartfelt admiration. The very act of trying to tarnish your name only magnified the undeniable truth about who you truly are. Every single time they brought your name up in conversation, people responded with powerful stories of your unwavering kindness, your inspiring resilience, and your unimpeachable integrity. They were hoping others would eagerly join in on the slander, but what they inadvertently created was a public stage for people to openly highlight your best qualities. Without even meaning to, they transformed your life into a powerful testimony that kept being repeated to an ever-widening audience. What was supposed to be your downfall instead became your most effective advertisement. This is the agonizing irony. They simply can't escape. Their calculated manipulation didn't shrink you. It amplified you significantly. They ended up introducing your name to new circles you might never have reached on your own. But instead of hearing the lies they were so desperately trying to spread, those new ears only heard the truth, and the profound respect for you only grew stronger as a direct result. They imagined your stellar reputation would sink under the crushing weight of damaging rumors, but the exact opposite occurred. It rose even higher, powerfully reinforced by the unwavering loyalty of those who truly knew you. They became your unpaid promoters without being asked to do so, and without even realizing it. Every attempt to assassinate your admirable character turned into a powerful marketing campaign for your consistent authenticity. They wanted your name to be forever associated with scandal and controversy, but now, when your name comes up in any conversation, it's inextricably tied to strength, dignity, and undeniable honor. What they set in motion was now completely beyond their control. Once people saw how consistent the respect for you truly was, they quickly stopped listening to the obvious lies and started openly questioning the deeply troubling motives behind them. And just like that, the spotlight completely shifted and their wicked scheme was exposed. You didn't just successfully survive the smear campaign, you actually thrived because of it. In desperately trying to destroy you, they ended up spreading your inspiring legacy even wider than before. And now the admiration they unlocked simply can't be taken back. They ultimately lost, not because they failed to lie effectively, But because their transparent lies only served to reveal even more of your fundamental truth, they assumed people would have hidden grievances just waiting to spill out. But instead they heard powerful testimonies of personal transformation, profound healing, and genuine inspiration. And there's simply no way to effectively argue against someone's lived experience. You can try to dismiss rumors, you can actively deny juicy gossip, but you cannot erase the way someone undeniably felt when another person changed their life for the better. Every single answer they received powerfully confronted them with a reality they didn't want to face. Your presence in other people's lives had been profoundly powerful. Your life wasn't just a passing impression. It had deep, lasting roots in the hearts and minds of so many. That's the kind of enduring legacy that quietly builds itself without any grand announcements or carefully orchestrated gestures. It's the quiet but undeniable evidence of someone who consistently lives authentically. And while they stood there frustrated and defeated, you stood tall and powerfully validated, not because you desperately defended yourself, but because countless others carried your inspiring story safely within them. They realized far too late that the more they tried to interrogate your impeccable character, the more they exposed the positive influence of your unwavering integrity. You weren't just passively liked or casually respected. You were genuinely remembered by all those whose lives you had positively impacted. And that kind of genuine imprint simply cannot be silenced, no matter how hard anyone tries to do so. Here's a key insight to remember from this whole mess. What they didn't realize is that their questions carried significant weight, not the kind that made you look bad, but the kind that made them look exposed and incredibly insecure. Every time they brought your name up, it wasn't received as innocent concern or casual conversation. People could clearly hear the troubling undertone. It wasn't a sincere curiosity, it was a consuming envy. It wasn't a legitimate investigation, it was an unhealthy obsession. The way they repeatedly circled back to your life, your choices, and your very name made it abundantly clear to everyone that something much deeper and darker was driving them. And it certainly wasn't a sincere desire for the unvarnished truth. Instead of successfully gathering dirt, what they actually gathered was intense suspicion. People began to openly notice the troubling pattern. Why are you so deeply focused on them? Why do you keep asking about someone who is clearly respected and admired by so many? Their persistent questions, instead of planting seeds of doubt about you, inadvertently planted serious doubts about them. It became increasingly clear that this wasn't about uncovering anything actually hidden. It was solely about their pathetic need to somehow validate their own consuming jealousy. And when jealousy is the primary driver of the questioning, it always inevitably reveals itself to the world. Their persistence became their ultimate confession. Every probing inquiry into your impeccable character, every clumsy attempt to fish for negativity only served to expose them to those around them. It showed just how much mental and emotional space you occupy in their mind, how deeply unsettled they are by your consistent presence, and how utterly desperate they are to find even a shred of evidence that could somehow justify their intense resentment. People could see it clearly. You weren't the one under a powerful microscope. They were. The painful irony is that jealousy is one of the hardest emotions to skillfully hide. It often bleeds through a person's tone, body language, and specific choice of words. And in this particularly egregious case, it bled through their persistent questioning. Instead of successfully making you look somehow guilty, it only made them look small, insecure, and utterly pathetic. Instead of exposing your non-existent flaws, it only exposed their deeply rooted insecurity. People could easily see that the only reason someone would dig so hard into a life that is so respected by so many is because they simply couldn't handle the brilliant light that consistently shines from it. So in the end, their persistent questioning spectacularly backfired. What was specifically intended to cast a long shadow on you only illuminated their consuming envy. They didn't need to verbally confess to their unhealthy feelings. Their actions said it all far more powerfully than any words ever could. Every single time they brought you up in conversation, it was less about you and far more about the all-consuming jealousy they simply couldn't contain. And now, everyone knows it. You had one mission in mind: to drag your good name through the mud so no one would ever see you in the same positive light again. They imagined whispered complaints turning into nasty rumors, those unfounded rumors morphing into general consensus, and that warped consensus turning into the tarnished legacy they so desperately wanted to create for you. But here's where life's profound irony cuts the deepest of all. Their very attempts to stain your reputation only served to polish it even brighter than before. The more negativity they pushed onto others, the more those around you countered with respect, heartfelt admiration, and the undeniable truth. What was intended to be mud instead became the pure gold that highlighted your symbolic crown for all to see. Every single word spoken in your favor became a priceless jewel, a valuable testimony that couldn't be bought with money or fabricated through deception. And it wasn't just superficial compliments either. It was layered with genuine weight and personal meaning. People weren't just praising you out of mere pity or a sense of obligation. They were actively defending your strong character with specific stories, heartfelt memories, and the living proof of the kind of person you've consistently been throughout your life. That kind of powerful defense can't be carefully staged. It's organic, it's undeniable, and every single time it surfaced, it turned into another priceless jewel in the symbolic crown you never asked for, but certainly earned through your hard work and integrity. Meanwhile, those who desperately wanted your ultimate downfall had to sit there in deafening silence while their grand plan spectacularly backfired in the most humiliating way possible. The very audience they tried so hard to poison became your most outspoken witnesses, and even worse, your staunchest defenders. They simply couldn't understand how the same people they had hoped would enthusiastically join in on the slander instead became the very same people who actively lifted your name even higher. That ironic reversal wasn't just a simple failure, it was truly poetic justice. What burns them the most is that they unintentionally crowned you in a very public forum. They sought to strip you of all your hard-earned dignity, yet they became the very hands that unwittingly placed honor on your worthy head. They desperately wanted to make your name untouchable in the worst possible way, but they ended up making it untouchable in the very best way. Their wicked scheme wasn't just soundly defeated, it was completely inverted on itself. Their calculated attack became your public coronation. And the simple truth is that that crown isn't fragile or hollow. It isn't based on fleeting popularity or shallow admiration. It's solidly built on unwavering trust, profound honor, and the undeniable testimony of the countless lives you've positively impacted over the years. That's precisely why it's permanent and can never be taken away. They wanted to see you buried deep in the ground, but instead they became the very shovel that dug up your hidden treasure. And now, no matter how much they seethe in anger, your name carries a weight they can never strip away. It carries a well-deserved crown they accidentally placed on your head. At the end of the day, their meticulously constructed schemes didn't just fail. They became the loudest, most undeniable proof of your true strength. They wanted dirt, but they instead uncovered pure gold. They wanted whispers of scandal, but they instead unearthed glowing testimonies of undeniable honor. They thought they could easily write your story, but the indelible truth was already permanently etched into the countless lives of those you have touched. Every single attempt to diminish you only revealed just how deeply respected, trusted, and admired you truly are at your core. What makes this whole situation even sweeter is the fact that you never had to beg for a strong defense or try to orchestrate a skewed narrative in your favor. Your life already spoke eloquently for itself. And when the spotlight turned bright, it wasn't you who looked desperate or 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 looked desperate or